In the past several years, some 650 million hectares of land have been degraded or destroyed across Latin America. But a new effort at forest restoration is underway that could save some of that land. It's part of a project called Initiative 2020, and it's sponsored by the World Resources Institute in Washington, D.C. And joining us now to discuss this ambitious project is Walter Vergara. He's a senior fellow at the WRI. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
I want to go through some numbers here. Your initiative hopes to restore 20 million hectares of land in Latin America and in the Caribbean. How many countries does that include? What countries are we talking about?
There are 8 countries already engaged in Initiative 2020. That number may increase in the near future, but these countries cover all biomes from Mexico to Chile.
Can you tell us who or what is degrading the land that has caused this problem?
Well, there are many drivers for degradation in Latin America. Some of the most important are deforestation, that is caused by activities like agriculture and forestry. Illegal mining is also responsible for some of it. Cattle ranching also, when not properly undertaken, and agricultural activities, when not done in a sustainable manner, may also result in land degradation. So it's a multitude of drivers.
So I imagine you have to get a lot of people on board. What are the first steps when it comes to tackling this problem? You just can't go in and do whatever you want.
Absolutely right. Well, the most important thing, point number 1, is to get the political will behind you. If governments, national, regional, local, understand the benefits for land restoration, they'll be the principal motivators and the principal drivers for restoration. But Initiative 2020 has also an emphasis to bring private sector. This is one of the characteristics of 2020 that differentiates it from other initiatives. The private sector is a very important player in land restoration. Land restoration can be good for business, good for people, and good for the planet.
In many cases, though, it's big business that is causing harm to the environment. So how do you help benefit business with your restoration effort? What is the strategy here?
In the private sector, you will always have people that understand long-term concerns, that are worried about the environment, worried about sustainability, worried about livelihoods. And that's the private sector that we want to capture first. And working with them, we'll be able to establish a series of practices and experiences that can bring other players into play. Now, right now, we have 5 private investment groups associated to 20 by 20. These are groups mostly in Europe that have an interest in land restoration because of the many benefits that are associated, social, environmental, and financial.
Your plan calls for working with cities to improve the quality of life. And among those improvements is developing sustainable transportation systems within those cities. Do you think that can be achieved by 2020? That's only 5 years away.
Yeah, well, the transport issue is a very complex problem in Latin America. But there are some areas of the transport sector that are more amenable to change. And I'll give you just one example. The context is that the transport sector is growing very fast because Latin America has been urbanized. Many people are moving into cities very quickly. We have some of the largest cities in the planet. Mexico City, after Shanghai, is the largest city in the region. In addition to that, people are increasing their standard of living, so they're moving into cars. The motorization rate is increasing. And there is a modal shift. People are leaving buses and opting for smaller vehicles. So within that context, if you are able to change the basis of power of the transport sector, if instead of using fossil fuels, you use electricity or use fuels that have less of a carbon footprint, then you can induce a significant change. But 2020 is not a realistic date for changes in transport sector. I would say this is something that will happen by mid-century. But there is the potential to move the transport sector in urban areas in Latin America from fossil fuels to electricity, to electric transport. And China, indeed, is one of the players in manufacturing the technology to achieve these goals.
And as we mentioned, this is such an ambitious, huge project, 20 million hectares by 2020. How do you pay for it all? Who is behind funding this project?
Yes, that's also a very important question. How do we get the money to do this? Now, certainly there will be a combination of sources. In cases where you want to restore land for public purposes, the sources will be public. Government resources, budgetary resources, in some cases, bilateral resources, countries in Europe or other regions on the planet that want to contribute to restoration or conservation of forests in Latin America. But there is another dimension that is equally important, and that is the dimension of productive uses: agriculture, forestry, cattle ranching, pastures, for the production of food, feed, and fiber, the 3 Fs. Now, there you need the participation of the private sector. They are essential to do this. And as I said before, there is a group of companies, of impact investors, that are very interested not only in doing business, but doing a business that has a meaningful endpoint for livelihoods and for the environment. So we are targeting those type of impact investors. Right now, Initiative 2020 has about $365 million that are being provided, targeted by these companies. We'll invest that amount of money in Latin America for land restoration purposes, but we'll need much more. So we're talking to other impact investors all over the planet to try to bring in those resources, and also coordinating with budgetary resources from countries and bilateral funds.
All right, we'll see how it goes. Mr. Walter Vergara, thank you so much for joining us here on America's Now.
Very pleased to be here. Thank you.
America's Now